This is episode 2 of No School Station, a mini-series by Studium Generale and the Art Education as Critical Tactics team of ArtEZ. Welcome back to No School Station, where we share our views and reflections on the idea of no school, a creative space in which students and teachers are part of a community of learners, working together in a constant process of co-creation. We want to inspire and inform you on that idea, but we also would like you to think along. In this second episode, we focus on the theme of magnetism. Magnetism is about attraction, the combination of opposite forces. In the pedagogy of No School, this is one of the key elements. Without attraction, or to say it differently, without binding elements, there is no education. First up is a short conversation between our curator Fabiola Camuti and Ezme Davis, a sociologist and pedagogue trained in the Montessori method, an educational approach that sees the learner as the one who is eager for knowledge. Ezme collaborates with the Art Education as Critical Tactics professorship on the No School project to create new pedagogical environments. In this short interview, they talk about the binding elements of education. What are those elements that make the educational relationship so strong in a no-school situation? So sit back, close your eyes, and connect.
Hi Ezme, thanks a lot for being with us in this virtual conversation. So our theme for today's episode is magnetism. I was always myself fascinated by the idea of attraction, by how this force of attraction can be found in education, and more specifically, of course, in education in this confusing time. Could you maybe comment on this?
This force of attraction that you speak of has been given different names through history. The Romans called it genius. The genius, they said, was a tutelary or moral spirit that guides us and watches over every person from birth. It is, they said, the teacher within. This does sound quite far-fetched to many, but to make it a little more concrete, all you need to do is to look at every child that is born. This force makes itself visible at this time. No one really has to teach this child to roll over, crawl, walk, talk. All we do is create a safe space. If this environment isn't available, it doesn't really stop the learning in children. It does impact it, however. When we listen to stories of individuals that have grown up in conditions that are far from ideal, where they come from environments that are impoverished or are in conflict and in constant turmoil, and yet you see these individuals not just finding themselves, but also their calling. And I think this is testament to this genius, to this energy, to this force that exists and propels us from within. I think acknowledging this genius in all of us, in every individual, and putting our faith in it right now is what will help us navigate this current time.
I have another question for you regarding this idea of attraction. As pedagogue, which are the binding elements in education according to you?
When it comes to education and educational environments, we need to acknowledge that they are highly complex mechanisms, and it's simply because they deal with human beings. They are nurturing human resource. Every space, hence, comes with its own unique story. We have to understand that there is no one ideal. What has happened with this pandemic is that the most binding elements have been catapulted into the spotlight. And these elements are very simple. It's been there all along. It's essentially the learner, the teacher or the guide, and the environment. And you'll find that these elements are intrinsic to any learning environment and everywhere. Examining and contemplating these now becomes key. It is what will help us find future solutions. Right now, all of us are turning to technology for solutions. I think what becomes important is to remember that technology is a tool that all of us are using to support us and to assist us. It cannot, however, replace any of these key elements.
That is nicely put. Thanks. And one last question for you for today. I think it is fair to say that we live in a time of opposites and oppositions that affects our lives in general and our lives as learners. Outside versus inside, offline versus online, proximity and distance, physical versus virtual. And it is sometimes hard to find the nuances, the in-between spaces in these opposites. So my question is, how can we as no-school learners find that final touch to our recipes without being stuck in such strict binary categories? How can we find the magnetic field in our educational environment?
These nuances that you speak of, finding those in-between spaces and striking a balance, these are paradoxes that have always existed when it comes to the educational paradigm. What is compounding all of it right now is that we have lost the comfort that comes in the form of routines and habits. As human beings, we crave familiarity and predictability. And so, in a sense, what is happening with everybody right now is that there is a sense of loss that is being experienced. And this, I feel, is making this task feel even more challenging and overwhelming. As far as the creative processes of finding solutions go, I think that has already started. The fact that we are contemplating questions like the limitations of online education, if it is a feasible solution that will cater to all sections of society, means we are headed in the right direction. We will find in time these nuances, the solutions, but what we need to understand that it is going to require commitment to process, time and patience. We also need to recognize that we will encounter endless shades of gray, and it's not going to be all black and white. There will be no one panacea. We each have to figure out our own recipes, figure out what works best for us, for our learners and our guides, and our communities. In Montessori education, there's something called the Montessori Trinity. It's a triangle, and at the apex is placed the learner, and on the sides are placed the guide and the environment. What I love about this triangle is the fact that it makes concrete these in-between spaces, and it makes evident the influence and how they impact each other. I can't really go into details of it all, but let's look at what these environments that are based on this idea look like. So if you were to look at learners in these environments, you will find that these learners are comprised of different age groups. It's not just one age group. And what this does is that it makes learners take on multiple roles. The learners in here also take on the role of mentors, of leaders. You have young individuals looking up to their peers who have more experience. And they are also observing and growing into these roles for the future. If you look at the teacher, she isn't the sole keeper of knowledge. Neither is she entirely responsible for imparting it. She is as much a learner as the ones she guides. She is part of the environment not just for the sake of the learners, but for herself as well. At the end of the day, what this individual realizes that she is learning a craft herself. The experiences in these environments that greet every individual are authentic. The learners in these environments are given the freedom of choice, freedom to direct their own learning. Learning is not prescribed. The experiences and the environment go through periods of serenity But then there are also equal opportunities to experience turbulence, and students and guides learn to coexist through all of this in this space. The environment is very dynamic. It's constantly responding to the learner and the guide and to circumstances. This triangle really gives you a sense of the connection and the interplay between these three elements. When they work together and harmonize, they can be likened to a living organism. There is a mutualism that is created, there is flow, there is a sense of well being and community. All of us need to start embracing ideas like collaborating versus teaching, and ideas like I can teach myself versus I need to be taught all the time. This shift is what is going to empower future learners. The spaces and the in betweens required for this to happen will grow alongside learners, and guides will as well. And they will essentially build the environment that they need. I think that what models like this and what no school does is in fact shed light on the fact that all the ingredients that we need and require are available to us. It is now just a question of collaborating, putting our heads together and creating our own new recipes that will work for our communities.
Our second contribution comes from Danny Jeroense. Danny is the teacher leader and researcher on creativity and design at the Vocational School for Design CHIPAP. He's also a media artist and musician, and he's a member of the No School movement. His talk is about the magnetic power of the school building that helps us all connecting. How can we use the power of attraction between people to keep on learning, to keep on creating outside of that building? How can we use our educational network to overcome physical distance?
Schools are learning networks full of actors wanting to learn. These networks are charged by the current that is created through the difference in knowing what to learn and learning what to know. In these networks, learners are actors and creators. What they are discovering, learning, and putting into action by creating is experienced by other actors. The actor's cut of the actor's own learning is a public affair in the learning network, which everybody in the field of the network was a part of. What the learners create is tangible. It can be heard, seen, smelled, touched, and tasted. It can be experienced. These creations ask for a response, and because these creations are experienced by others, that's what they get. They might pull and inspire learners, they might repel and put off others. The creations themselves also become autonomous actors, force fields in itself, broadcasting what the actor has learned by creating it without the creator being present. All this pulling and repelling force fields caused by creations and their creators creates movement. This is the buzz, the vibe, the atmosphere people are always talking about while entering our schools. This is the culture that schools are part of, the network that the schools as a network itself is connected to, and in which learners are introduced in through school. You don't have to be quiet to hear it, you don't have to take a good look to see it, you don't have to take a deep breath to smell it, or grab hold of something or someone to feel it. It's just undeniably there. There's no way around it. It's there for everyone to experience, and it leaves no one unmoved and sets us all in motion. It charges and propels us into new directions, towards new discoveries, new questions, new connections, new learning outcomes, and new creations, from which this all starts again. In these times we are quarantined from our school buildings. You could say that no school is now in effect. Launched like a thief in the night without us knowing beforehand, and like a good idea that has been recognized as such. It has spread like wildfire, but also is somewhat out of fire starter's control. But no school doesn't stand for no building, and that's the situation that schools, that learning networks are in. A thought in my head was popping up, and it was, isn't the building a giant magnet? Isn't the building pulling us inside its walls every day? In some of the work-related WhatsApp groups that I'm in, people have been posting pics of the school building. Those pictures got both smiles and sad faces as a response, and also made me feel quite nostalgic. Of course it isn't the magnet. It's merely a container where a big part of the learning network resides. You can put a powerful magnet in a box, Its force extends well beyond the box its physical borders. You can place a magnet outside of the box, it will still hold and cast its force. But if all actors and learners are magnets in the force that's the learning network and the distance between them is increased, will they still pull and repel each other? Are the forces between the actors strong enough to overcome these distances? In these times of Zooming, Teams, Skyping, lots of new methods of coaching and instructions are being developed. And I'm amazed and proud of the willingness and ability to develop such an amount of new material and undertake such complex operations in such a short time. Our schools are still a network, are still connected to other networks. Learners still meet other learners and their learning learners face to face, but in the limited space of their phones and laptop screens. To me, the limited space of the screen is reminiscent of the shadows on the wall and the allegory of the cave by Plato. The state of the learning network in which it is now doesn't move me as much into new directions as the one I used to know. Seems to have lost some of its force and seems to be a shadow of what the network was before this crisis took place. I'm asking you, do you still feel part of its culture? Do you still experience the culture? Do you still experience other actors creating? Do you still experience other actors learning? And do you still see their creations, pulling and repelling you to new directions? At the same time, perhaps the culture that we had before this crisis, the state that the learning network was in, needed a change. When a network that the network is in, society, changes, shouldn't the learning network learn to change because of it? This crisis, this situation, may seem dire, but as creatives, doesn't crisis come with the territory? If there's a block, you can keep pushing, but there's always a path to be made or found around it. And when I look at my screens or outside my window, or when I'm in line at the supermarket checkout, keeping my distance, I also see people making new connections, new networks, getting new ideas and creating new solutions. If crises are part of life, and if crises like these will become more part of society as some say, isn't it time for a change in the network? Shouldn't our learning networks open up more so the network itself becomes more resilient and the force less decentralized so we'll get a bigger reach? Isn't it time for new paths to be made, so new and more people get an introduction in the culture and change that culture for the better and keep the network in motion? What can you do as an actor, as a creator, to not only stay connected to the culture of our schools, but also expand on it and create a new pathway, or perhaps lay the first new stones? Okay, question time is over. A call to action. Whatever you choose to do, get others experience the making of, to experience your creation and make it tangible.
As in the first episode, we want to end the second episode on a piece of music. We want to make creation a part of reflecting and the sharing of those reflections as a starting point for learning. The music for this episode is created by Christian Pabst. Christian is a pianist, a composer, and a conservatory teacher. He chose to react to the theme of magnetism with the song Like the Waves from his album Song of Opposites. His own act of composition for the song really resonates with the idea of binding elements, unifying the two music genres he loves the most, and that some believe to be contrary to each other: jazz, the music of the moment, and classical music, the music of eternity. The song Like the Waves tries to navigate in a new environment. That was Christian Pabst. Christian also released a new album called Inner Voice. Be sure to check that out. You can find a link to his website in the show notes. And that's it for episode 2 of No School Station, a collaboration between Studium Generale ArtEZ and the Art Education as Critical Tactics team. The show is curated by Fabiola Camuti and Cassandra Onk. It is edited by Joke Alkema and produced and hosted by me, Dennis Gaans, for Studium Generale. Our theme music is by Mauro Casarini. We'll be back next week. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay inside, stay connected.